Hey everybody. Today I'm going to do something a little different. Today I'm going to talk about a music video. And by that I mean I'm going to actually just examine extensively the discography of a band I enjoy and loosely tie it in to one of their music videos. Today we are going to talk about the Protomen. So it begins.
No matter which one of us lives, the ground we're standing on will blow away.
The Protomen are a band based on the Mega Man games by Capcom. They debuted around 2006 with their album The Protomen, Act 1, a concept album that served as an interpretation of the plot of Mega Man. Loosely, I'm not actually familiar with the game, so I don't actually know the plot. If you'd like to link me to some comprehensive plot videos, I mean, don't worry, but regardless, do it if you want. Granted, they'd done live performances before that, but they really hit the scene once they recorded that album. They've been going strong ever since, with the rotating roster of cast members all performing under somewhat amusing aliases, like Raoul Panther. That's a good one. Regardless, before I go off on a nerd tangent, which, granted, that's very appropriate for this subject matter, Light Up the Night is a music video they got made. It's the climactic song from Act 2, The Father of Death, their second album. It stars James Ransone of Generation Kill fame, also from Sinister and It, as Joe, the lone man willing to aid Dr. Light in his fight against Dr. Wily, who has taken over the city after murdering Light's beloved and then framing Light for it. It's obviously a very low budget production, but it's very good for being obviously that, due to the obvious passion put into it. It looks great, it sounds great, it's got a great little Blu-ray you can pick up for about $10 plus shipping. Granted, I did spring for the starter pack, which runs about $50 plus shipping, because I love these guys and I want to support them. But even if you don't want to purchase anything, they do offer this whole video on YouTube for free. You don't get the band commentary for a 16-minute music video that ends up being a 2-hour affair when the band finishes the music video and decides to pop on the movie Tremors and just riff, which, granted, that's amazing. It's fucking awesome. The video rules, and there's no actual cost of entry, so a review is useless. I don't even think they have ads on their channel. No, this is a review of the band themselves. Let's start with Act 1. As stated, Act 1 is an interpretation of the story of Mega Man. I don't know which one specifically, kind of just all of them. It starts off with some world building, introducing the fact that Wily has ruled the city with an iron, well, steel, fist for longer than most can remember. And no one has the ability nor the courage to stand against Wily and his army of robots, led by the robot masters Cutman, Gutsman, Elecman, Bombman, Fireman, and Iceman. No one except Thomas Light. Dr. Light decides to build Protoman, who is a perfect man, an unbeatable machine, hell-bent on destroying every evil standing between man and freedom, built for one purpose: to destroy Wily's army of evil robots. Ready, willing, prepared to fight. Protoman fights valiantly. According to the band's animated music video for the song, he defeats all of the masters except for Gutsman and Elecman, the latter of the pair landing the final blow and defeating Protoman. The crowd that had gathered to eagerly watch the fight disperses, their hopes crushed. Following this, Light grieves his son and works to build a new one. Over the course of this, over the years, he notices humanity's willingness to live under Wily's tyranny and unwillingness to stand for what is righteous, barring occasional whispers of the fallen hero Protoman. Because of this, he decides his new son, Mega Man, will not have the burden of fighting for humanity. Of course, Mega Man rejects this decision and decides to run off to avenge his brother and to save mankind, despite his father begging him not to. As he tears through Wily's army like wet paper, destroying all in his path with ease, cheered on by humanity, he comes across the new robot master. As he taunts the new leader of the robot army, he realizes that this master is familiar to him, that he too has the same shine that's in his own eyes. Of course, this turns out to be his brother, Protoman, rebuilt and repurposed by Wily. The next song, The Stand, Man or Machine, is not only my favorite song of the album, it's also my favorite song in the band's entire discography. The raw emotion Protoman sings with is palpable, as he explains how humanity abandoned him. And since they are unwilling to fight for themselves, they are absolutely deserving of their own subjugation. The line, "they don't want a hero, they just want a martyr, a statue to raise," is incredibly prescient. And the feeling and implication that Protoman is begging his brother to stand down simply because he's been in Mega Man's shoes before and knows humanity's fickle loyalties will lead to nothing but pain for him, as there are no heroes left in man. It is absolutely heart-wrenching, reflected not only in the lyrics, but in the instrumental melody like the guitar wail. One of my favorite parts, too, is the drums at the end of the song, in my mind, signifying Protoman killing off his own emotions, preparing for war, knowing that this is going to have to come to blows. Eventually, while Mega Man and Protoman try to convince each other that their side is the righteous one, they both realize that this conflict will only be solved by the death of the other. They both fire their weapons, and after the blast, Mega Man is left standing. Protoman falls. Before his death, Protoman expresses that there may be a possibility that his death may serve as a morality tale for parents to tell their children, in the hope that they too will rise up and realize that they are free. Of course, the crowd cheering on the death of his brother sours Mega Man to humanity, as the remaining robot army opens fire on the gathered crowd under the orders of Dr. Wily himself. Mega Man does nothing to stop it. He walks away. Honestly, Act 1 is among my favorite albums ever. It's gritty, imperfect, and beautiful not just despite its flaws, but in part because of them. The passion behind it absolutely shines through. Next up is Act 2, The Father of Death. Act 2 is a prequel to Act 1. It focuses on the relationship between Dr. Light and Dr. Wily as they turn from friend to foe, and then the rise of Dr. Wily's rule. It is heavily influenced by the 1984 Walter Hill film Streets of Fire, which, as I've stated before, seems to be wildly influential to every piece of media I hold dear. It begins with Dr. Light, or rather with a letter he's writing to his beloved, Emily, detailing his distrust of his partner, Dr. Wily. Granted, all of this is told in the liner notes, so if you didn't buy a physical CD with the lyric book, you'd better look all of this up, because track 1 is an instrumental. After that, we're detailed to Dr. Light's history as he argues with Dr. Wily over why they decided to get into robotics in the first place. While Dr. Light recounts how he wanted to automate dangerous jobs stemming from the death of his father, a miner who died while Light was still a child, Wily's intentions seem more sinister and cynical of man's nature. He realizes that he can build a dependency on the machines, and that they can turn this desire of comfort into something incredibly profitable. Eventually realizing that Light will not budge from his viewpoint, though. However, Light's desire to advance mankind's capabilities and desire to help overpower his doubts long enough for him to activate the newest prototype geological unmanned terraforming system, or Gutsman. As Light heads home to meet Emily, wrestling with his doubts, he is terrified of the implication of the power he has just handed over to Wily. However, Wily arrives first, asking Emily to be a part of his plan to subvert Thomas Light and take control of the city. She rebuffs him, and he has her murdered by the Gutsman, calling the police as Light discovers her corpse. As Light evades the police, Wily makes a broadcast about the murder, swearing to bring Light to justice and using the almighty power of the media and his new broadcasting system to slander Light and turn popular opinion against him. This song, The Hounds, which is the 4th track, is one of my favorites on the album. It has this smug, jazzy tone not present anywhere else on the album, as it's from the perspective of Wily, a man who has won. It's also got a very salient undertone about the power of persuading the uninformed masses that really hits hard nowadays. Afterwards, Light is captured. The police had found him haunting Emily's grave. As he waits for his day in court, he laments the frenzy Wily's whipped the city into, all while forgetting the woman whose death has sparked the whole thing. Defeated, he plans to plead guilty, accepting the responsibility of his involvement in the death of the woman he loved, being the only one to even remember her name and hoping for the death penalty. Of course, Wily's paid off the judge and jury to pronounce Light not guilty, simply to stir up discontent and distrust of the whole system. Light leaves the city disgraced, threatened by the mob as he leaves. Wily takes over the running of the city, appointed leader by the mob. During Light's absence, the city actually flourishes. The steampunk slums turn into a bright, shining urban utopia. A generation grows up knowing little hardship, as robots take over every dangerous job and eventually automate all of commerce. The city grows fat and content off of the steel backs of the Gutsmen, most of the populace living a life of leisure. And those who do not simply vanish. The undesirables, such as the homeless, just disappear. Of course, this is not the paradise it seems, as there are the whispers of the wrath of the teat that feeds this new generation, the auxiliary umbilical cord that could be taken away at any time, which would leave this new lazy populace simply incapable of fending for themselves. Not to mention that anyone who just expresses that idea simply isn't there the next day. This feeds a growing resentment with this gilded cage, particularly in one young man by the name of Joe, played in the music video by James Ransone. Joe decides he's had enough from the city. He's tired of it and attempts to break out of the city, seeing as he feels a burning in his blood that cannot be extinguished by the life the city affords him. He hates the city. He feels the tension. He feels it in the wind riding away on his bike, screaming out to the void, hoping someone will hear him and answer. His youthful rebellious spirit intensified by the fact that he knows in his heart that there is something wrong in this city. Something dark is on its way. Of course, something dark does follow him as he attempts to leave. The same gutsman that murdered Emily has followed him to the outskirts of the city. And it's out for blood. Instead of cowering, though, Joe decides to fight it head on, to drag this monster out into the light, instead of letting it continue to skulk around in the shadows. He does this right in front of Dr. Light. And after Joe blasts it with its own gun, Light delivers the killing blow, meting out some measure of revenge against the weapon that took his beloved away. Of course, it is just a tool. Light decides that Joe may be the hero to take on the man that's truly responsible, Albert Wiley. The next song is Light Up the Night, the subject of the music video and probably the most mainstream song of the entire discography, seeing as it was in Rock Band 4. Of course, the whole Joe arc, this song, the prior two, and the one after it, were also included in the web series Video Game High School. This song is great. The music video's portrayal of the perspective is a little odd, as it's the Protomen performing it within the universe they've created, with a great little nod to Streets of Fire as their companion act. It's great to see that Ellen Aim did well after her deal with Raven Shattuck. Within the album, though, it seems to be Joe in conversation with Dr. Light. There's not a lot of liner notes for this one. But as a song, it's incredible. Among the best of the album. It's got a heartbeat and an energy and a build unrivaled by anything else on the album. In it, Joe and Dr. Light lay out their desire to rebel against Wily and flesh out a plan for a revolution by destroying the control node in Wily's tower, shutting off all the robots at once, as well as shutting off Wily's misinformation stronghold at the same time. It's a little odd in the music video to hear what's presumably Joe and Light discussing this plan over video of them discussing it, but differently. But since the framing of it is that it's the band playing it, not the actual discussion, it's forgivable. As Joe rides through the city towards the tower, he contemplates what this act will result in. Silence. He tries to remember if he's ever actually known silence. He crashes his bike through the tower's door and heads rapidly up to the roof, causing quite a stir. As he tires on the stairs, he steels himself and reaches the final door with the explosives Dr. Light has given him. He opens the door. Now, this is where the video really departs from the liner notes. In the album proper, the explosives simply detonate early, with no actual reason given. In the video, the control room is already packed with explosives, with a proximity detonator. In the album, Joe dies thinking he's won. In the video, he understands that he's been had. In my opinion, the despair of that realization in the video is truer to the world the Protomen have laid out in Act 1. And so that is the one I would consider canon. Whether Joe realized it or not, Wily had always planned to lose the tower. As Joe falls to his death, backup towers are already activating. The signal has not been stopped. All Light has done is hand Wily an excuse for harsher crackdowns while sending this boy to his death. In despair, Light decides to die, standing in the path of a building about to crumble. In what he plans on being his last moments, he decides to read Emily's last letter to him, a letter he had not yet been able to bring himself to read. In it, Emily lays out how much she trusts Tom, and even though she wants to be with him, she knows that the city needs him more than she does. And with renewed resolve, Light decides that he cannot yet die. He has to bear the burden of resistance against Wily. He takes Joe's helmet, presumably to give it to his new project, Protomen, a hero designed in the image of man's last hero. Now, the Protomen have released a couple more songs since, from the fabled Act 3, sort of. They released a 2-song single in 2015 containing the songs This City Made Us, featuring presumably Roll trying to convince Mega Man to get back into the fight, despite his jaded outlook on the city and mankind in general. And also Hold Back the Night, which features presumably Roll trying to convince Dr. Light that the city is still salvageable. Both of these songs are great. It is a little disheartening that the punk lo-fi atmosphere of Act 1 is definitely being phased out a bit for the grand building of Act 2, which isn't a problem per se. I enjoy both, but I kind of prefer Act 1. Apparently there's a few more out there too, but I don't think I should discuss stuff that hasn't officially been released yet. They've also recently released a live show from 2011, live in Nashville. This is a nice little Blu-ray to have, as well as the live album accompanying it. It does the Act 2 songs really well. In fact, some of the instrumentation is better than on the album, in my opinion. But what's been done with the stuff from Act 1, which is kind of the meat of the concert, is a little disappointing. While this show proves to me that the whole saga could be done very easily as a stage play with very few tweaks, I don't dig some of the framing of perspective. In The Stand specifically, Mega Man seems to address the audience, and then sings the song himself. It's weird. It doesn't help that these lines are also kind of flubbed, from what I can only imagine would have sort of worked if the fourth wall being broken had a single other occurrence in the entire affair. But the line would be, I came to save mankind, I came here for vengeance, but now I realize I cannot have both. The line as delivered is, sometimes you can't have all both.
You cannot have both.
Now, granted, when I'm out singing it in public, in a residential neighborhood belting at the top of my lungs, I flub lines all the time, but it's also not my song. It's also very charming and I love the live show a ton. I just think this could have been delivered better. Granted, you're already fighting the perfection that is the track on album. You also can't just redo the take in a live show. As a comedian, I do get that. As a live performer, I get it. I understand. I just think that when we're able to do this again after COVID, veering too far off the established perspective isn't something I'd do without setting up that change first. Because the song is now being sung by Mega Man without warning, and it's just not his song. It's Protoman's. This puts a whole lot of cognitive dissonance to anyone who is following the story as a story and not just an album of songs, which I'm pretty sure is the intended audience that the Protomen wanted. And to be clear, I think this perspective switch could actually work if you set it up by having Protoman hack Mega Man or something, play that through his speakers. I also really enjoyed how they had Protoman show up in the live show, both in the show itself, in Sons of Fate, and also in the audience. Mega Man shooting him with a Nintendo zapper he had in a cowboy-style leather holster was adorable and very fitting with the aesthetics of the story. And some of the changes seem jarring at first, but I've come to love them, specifically the timing of Light's emphases in Unrest in the House of Light. He now actually gets to kind of have some emotional pauses, and I appreciate that from an acting standpoint. Overall, I really vibe with the Protomen. The world they build is great. The words they weave feel like they speak to some great truths. The underlying struggle for righteousness in the face of adversity and despair is a tale I will never tire of. I'd also recommend their non-act work, like The Cover-Up, a great album of covers framed as a soundtrack to a movie that doesn't actually exist, which features a phenomenal cover of In the Air Tonight that made it onto Cobra Kai Season 3, as well as A Night of Queen, which is, you guessed it, a live Queen cover album. I'm very glad that the Protomen are seemingly starting to find some mainstream success. I'm not going to say I've been fighting for them since the beginning. I came in pretty late in the game, like a couple of years ago. So I'm not going to act like a dumb hipster about it and complain that they sold out. Good for them. I am genuinely really happy that these warriors are getting some recognition. I just wish it had been a better year for this to come to them. Act 3 soon, hopefully.